We've spent 4 months investigating bombings and travelling inside Idlib. We've tracked down first responders, traced some of the children injured, interviewed eyewitnesses, gathered previously unseen footage, and gained access to an underground network of spotters intercepting fighter pilot chatter. We have a mass of information which lays out the case for war crimes about the attack the Russians insist never happened. July 22nd was the bloodiest day ever remembered in Marat al-Numan. And this was only the start. The second shelling is about to hit in an area known as the School District. We pieced together a comprehensive timeline of what happened that day and where, and it completely challenges the claims by Russia and the Syrian regime that this never happened. One of the first on the scene was American teacher Rania Kaiser.
We are getting shelled every day. We are getting killed every day. Mr. Trump, please stop this.
Now back home in Washington, Ms. Kaiser wants those responsible held to account.
I am holding the United States responsible for these atrocities because of their apathy. You know, staying silent to crimes like this is exactly like becoming a partner of it.
She documented the chaos of the day. Body parts of the dead were strewn everywhere.
I'm walking and the first thing that I see is a piece of leg. And by the time I got to the heart of the hole, I looked to the left and there was a store that I know the people that work in, and they sell falafel. I buy falafel from them every morning. And there was a kid there who was about maybe 16 or 17 years old. He was still alive. His intestines were completely out of his stomach. And he was saying, Ya Allah, Ya Allah.
She ran with a group of others, fearing another attack, taking shelter and praying.
You pray to God, of course. We all were praying to God. This is what they always do. This is their tactic. They shell the first time, and they wait a few minutes until people on the ground gather to rescue each other. And then they shell the second time. And that's when the impact, the big impact, truly happens. It's a conniving, evil method. You know, it's not like you want to kill a specific group. You want to kill everybody, even the rescuers.
Even as the volunteer medics headed off with some of the wounded, another bomb landed near the hospital. Marat al-Numan is the second largest city in Idlib province, a sprawling residential neighbourhood home to tens of thousands of people. The first bomb landed at just after 8:30 in the morning, in the middle of a market area. About 8 minutes later, the second landed in the same spot, a double tap, aimed at killing those rescuing the injured from the initial attack. It's also an area populated by schools. Across the city, a little over a kilometre away, and barely 11 minutes later, a third lands, near a mosque and a hospital. And at 9 o'clock, the fourth is dropped, adjacent to a cultural centre. But the most killed that day were around the twin bombings in the market area. It was packed with shoppers and homes. 30 men, 6 women and 8 children died, including a White Helmets rescuer. In the crater, there used to be a 3-storey apartment. 6 families lived here. All perished, or at least that's what they thought. One of the first activists and filmmakers on site is Hadi Abdullah. He'd been living in Marat al-Numan for 4 months and knew the area well.
The destruction was terrifying in every sense of the word. I used a drone to film the damage, which was huge. It was clearly a public market with lots of shops, and all of them were smashed to pieces.
They were searching the rubble for about 6 hours before they heard a girl's voice. It was Batul, only 7 years old, and she was nearly unconscious by the time they pulled her free. The rescuers then turned to her little brother, 3-year-old Ahmed. At first, they weren't even sure he was alive. But dazed and with a bad eye injury, he was also pulled out. Somehow the two of them had survived. They didn't know then, but the rest of the family, both parents and all siblings, were dead. The White Helmets volunteer who rescued them both told us they worked for more than 12 hours straight that day trying to save lives. The civilian casualties were high. We've spent 4 months talking to the man who pulled the children free, piecing together what happened. And we've travelled to Idlib several times to track down other witnesses and survivors to the Marat al-Numan bombings. The craters are still there, and the mental scars are as raw as ever.
At the beginning it was very difficult. At night we all have nightmares. I sometimes see myself trapped in the rubble, or I dream about aircraft targeting us.
But the bombings just didn't happen, according to the Russian Defense Ministry.
I want to emphasize that Russian aviation was not used in this area on July 22nd and did not fly there.
At the time, they produced maps showing the market intact. All fake news, according to the Russians. In fact, they were focusing on an area 300 meters away from the actual market which was hit. We put our investigation findings to the Russians several times, but haven't yet received a response. We spoke to the network of underground monitors intercepting Syrian regime and Russian fighter pilot radio frequencies. We're keeping them secret for their own safety. They've built up a log of fighter jet departure times, and their log matches the timing of the bombs dropped over Marat al-Numan that day. Their timings are also corroborated by eyewitnesses.
Although the Russians denied responsibility for this massacre, we're positive they did this, and it is a war crime.
Bombing hospitals is also a war crime. Many of the casualties in the Marat al-Numan airstrikes would ordinarily have come to this hospital. But hospitals are incredibly dangerous places in Idlib now, and there are few still operating. This one's set in the middle of an olive grove with no other buildings around, and its GPS coordinates had been supplied to the United Nations, of which Russia is a member. We searched through the debris to find as many documents as we could. And it's the list of the patients?
The people who need analysis.
Blood analysis?
Yeah.
The paperwork shows there were patients being treated inside the hospital building when it was hit. These are all war crimes, say the medics working in Idlib.
We share our hospital and public health centers with the United Nations, so they know everywhere the hospital and the public health center, and they bomb many of them.
The two siblings pulled out alive from the rubble of their home in Marat al-Numan spent weeks in hospital. We followed their progress since the bombings. Batul was much more seriously hurt and needed several operations, and there are more planned after suffering severe internal injuries. Both children were brought to Turkey for further treatment and to be looked after by elderly relatives who'd already fled Syria. Ahmed and his sister have a long recovery ahead, but they are getting better, able even to play with toys now like other children. They both still need a lot of medical help, but they are safe and alive. But the bombing of civilian targets like the children's home and hospitals is a systematic way of pushing the population out of an area, and appears to be a tactic which is being carried out with impunity. Alex Crawford, Sky News, Idlib.